It's one of the leading concerns of Americans, and that anxiety has grown over the years, especially over the past couple of years. And then, the past administration, the Biden-Harris administration, Vice President Kamala Harris was tasked to look at immigration, particularly those areas in the northern Central America part of south of the border. And she talked a lot about the root causes. Well, one way that trade can actually help be a part of the solution is by opening up our markets to companies that are in these countries. And, it just can move the needle a little bit. Like you said, there's not one magic bullet, but when we open our markets to an apparel, a clothing manufacturer in Guatemala, or, a pencil maker in Honduras or what have you, and take off tariffs and let them have access to the U.S. market. That's just one more thing that helps them to, get on their feet in terms of the economics and provide more economic footing for them to, in turn, which will hopefully help them stay in their home country and earn a decent living there instead of making that very dangerous trek to be an illegal immigrant in the U.S.
Yeah, I love this perspective because I always say we so often miss it in all kinds of foreign policy. We think we either got to throw money at it or build walls or just do those kinds of things. But it's the solution to so many things is that entrepreneurial spirit that people naturally have, that path to upward mobility and opportunity. Is really a game changer. And I think administrations on the left and the right have really missed it in terms of if you can help people have those opportunities, if your policy can be centered in supporting and being helpful in those spaces, then the whole dynamics of the conversation change in terms of who's actually trying to make that trek, as you suggested, that is dangerous and leads to a lot of problems on both sides of the border.
Yeah, exactly. And, it is a very dangerous trek. Just looking at the illegal immigration into the U.S., going way back to 1990, it was on a really sharp upward path up until about 2006 or 7, the global financial crisis. Then it started kind of trending downward. And then during the Trump administration, continued to go downward, and then with COVID. But then after COVID was over, and then the Biden-Harris administration came in, it's gone way back up again. And it's these three countries, northern Central America, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, where they're second, third, and fourth to Mexico. Mexico's the most popular place where they originate. But those other three countries are the next ones. And so, it's if we can actually just move the needle a little bit on helping economic, stability down there, every little bit helps. And, like I said in the piece, it really is, multi-pronged solution set. There's not one magic bullet, like you said. I actually worked for the Bush administration's Council of Economic Advisors, and President Bush had a whole immigration reform strategy laid out. And then, in studying that, working on that, we looked at what previous administrations had done. And then, and if you look across administrations, whether the Republican or Democrat, there's a common thread across all of them. And so there's widespread agreement on what needs to be done, secure the border and enforce our laws. And then, the third leg of that stool is provide, help economic stability in these countries. Yeah. So, and that's where, I argue that, trade is often overlooked.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important, component to all of this, because we do tend to focus on the things that we've been arguing about for decades and decades now. And I so agree with you. There's broad agreement. I still think we could solve 90% of immigration stuff in an afternoon on the floor of the House and the Senate because everybody agrees. But it's like you said, you secure the border, you have rule of law, and then you have compassion. Those are all compatible principles, and I think trade is such an important part of that. I love the way you pointed out in your piece, and I'd love for you to just go back to this for a moment and unpacking some of those commitments and the dynamics that change, whether it's the investment in steel production in Guatemala or, as you mentioned, like the sportswear company. Just give us a little more sense in terms of what those are and how that is actually compatible with rule of law, compassion, and opportunity.
Yeah. So when the previous a few years ago, when Vice President Harris went down there, and she met with a number of leaders in the public and private sector down there, and she was able to come back to the U.S. and secure billions. How many? I think it was hundreds of millions in public-private partnerships. So, for instance, one of the projects that the U.S. got was a sportswear company that they committed to purchasing $200 million in products from the region over 5 years. Okay, so think of that, $200 million. Yeah. Now, this is from a region whose GDP per capita, their annual income is, $5,000 to $8,000. Okay, so this can be a game changer for those workers in those factories. There's also another public-private partnership that pulled together some funds to give microloans for female entrepreneurs, right? Yeah. So, in the U.S., if you have PayPal, for instance, sometimes you get, a text or an email from PayPal saying, oh, you're a small business owner, we're offering you, a $5,000 loan, just click here. Well, we have access to those financial technologies, those tools. A lot of these entrepreneurs in these developing countries don't. So these microloans, even if it's a loan of, say, $500, $800, that can, again, be a game changer for an entrepreneur down there. And so if you believe in, that entrepreneurial spirit, and you believe in that, just wanting to, at everyone's root, right, core. I mean, everybody wants just to, have a peaceful, prosperous life, and they want their kids to, and these are the kinds of things that, these tools that have been used. Technical assistance for coffee producers, helping farmers down there to use technology for, to weather the changes in weather, no pun intended, the garments and textile manufacturers, and then, like you said, that Guatemala steel factory, which I had to sort of, smile at because the U.S. steel industry, uses import protection tools pretty aggressively. Right. Somebody's got to make the stuff.
That's right. Great perspective. This is a perfect think again moment, which is what we like to do on this show. Christine McDaniel, Senior Research Fellow with the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Great piece. Check it out at thehill.com. Looking at trade as a component of how we solve the illegal immigration crisis. Christine, thanks so much for your perspective today.
Thank you, Boyd.
All right, we'll step aside for a quick break. We'll come back with more Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around.
People have asked me why I chose soda weight loss instead of one of those shots or injections. Honestly, one of the reasons was because first, I knew soda got results. I just looked at my friends who'd already done it, and second, I knew those results stuck. With the shots, most people eventually gain back the weight they lost and then some, because it doesn't change the habits that led to their weight gain in the first place. Soda weight loss specializes in releasing the toxic deep down fat mass in the belly without drugs, pills, or shots. I let go of 70 pounds in just 5 months. They've helped me change my relationship with food and develop simple life habits that'll make my long-term success a sure thing. Basically, soda gets results and they last. See for yourself at sodaweightloss.com. Check out the thousands of before and after pictures of people just like you and me. While you're there, click the Request a Nutritionist callback. Within minutes, you'll be talking to someone who truly wants to help you get in the best shape of your life for the rest of your life. Go to sodaweightloss.com. That's SOTA weightloss.com. And remember, SOTA stands for, say it with me, State of the Art.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from the station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
For over 22 years, speaking on business on KSL News Radio has been a beloved tradition, celebrating our heroic business leaders and Utah consumers who have helped build one of the strongest state economies in the nation. Now, under the stewardship of the Salt Lake Chamber and hosted by Chamber President and CEO Derek Miller, the program continues to shine a spotlight on those who make Utah's business environment dynamic and thriving. With his expertise and passion, Derek brings the stories of our business community to life. As part of the Salt Lake Chamber, Speaking on Business is proud to continue its legacy of highlighting inspiring stories, trends, and special guests. Support Utah businesses now and be part of Utah's thriving economy. More information can be found at slchamber.com. That's slchamber.com.
One of the things I love about radio is that we are all hearing it at the same time. One of the differences between that and just scrolling on your phone is that I don't know when that story was posted, maybe an hour ago, maybe 3 days ago.
To your point about who wrote it, where did it come from, and is it dated information, our hope every day is that we can provide a more broad spectrum of information on a single topic that you can then take and make decisions on your own.
Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, inmate Taberon Honey set to be put to death early in the morning on Thursday. He'll be executed using the drug pentobarbital. Second, deputies shot and killed a West Haven man after he took 2 children hostage and threatened to harm them. Third, Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance spoke at a campaign event in Philadelphia today, criticizing Kamala Harris's vice presidential pick. That's Governor Tim Walz. 98 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. And as we continue to try to divide that rage from the reason, we recognize that the words have meaning and the meaning matters. And sometimes they get thrown around in pretty sloppy ways, in ways that incite, I-N-C-I-T-E, rather than providing insight, I-N-S-I-G-H-T. And in no realm is that happening more or louder, it seems, than as it relates to what's happening in the Middle East. And so I want to have a conversation about a lot of the reporting that's going on, the way things are being framed, and regardless about how you feel about the conflict itself, we have to get to how we talk about these kinds of things. And someone who's doing an extraordinary job with that, Kevin Williamson, national correspondent at the Dispatch, based in Virginia, and has a great piece in the Dispatch about Israel isn't risking a regional war. So listen carefully in all this as we go through. And Kevin, welcome back to the show.
Hi, always a pleasure to be here.
So let's dive into this a little bit. Of course, the words that get thrown about a lot is that either Benjamin Netanyahu is risking a regional war or he's doing this in his interest. Just break it down for us as you look at and assess where things really are.
Yeah, I was writing about this one particular headline in the New York Times about Netanyahu, quote unquote, risking a regional war, or sometimes you'll see headlines referring to the possibility of escalation or the risk or the threat of a regional war in the Middle East. And every time I see these, I kind of stop and scratch my head a little bit and think, well, the Israelis are being attacked by forces backed by the Iranian government. They're being attacked out of Yemen. They're being attacked out of Lebanon. How are they not already in a regional war? It seems like the regional war everyone's talking about risking has been going on for some time, and the Israelis are trying to win that regional war. And I don't think they're so much worried about risking one when it seems that one's already upon them.
Yeah, that's clearly that is the case. And when you look at the dynamics of all of that in terms of what Iran is doing and what it's doing through Hamas, through the Houthis, and through Hezbollah. Clearly, a regional war is going on in some way, shape, or form. And so how should we start having the conversation in terms of what should we be assessing, what should we be looking at, and how do we actually start to chart a path to be helpful?
Well, one of the problems we have in American political conversation is we're very focused on the United States, and we tend to read the rest of the world through the prism of American partisan divisions. And so Israel has a problem right now in that its prime minister is Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a representative of the right-wing coalition in Israel. And now, irrespective of what you think about Netanyahu, and there are some things about his history and his administration that have been less than admirable, certainly. Holding our attitudes toward Israel hostage because we have a government that's of the left-wing party and they have a government of the right-wing party would be an extremely foolish thing to do, but that often happens.
Yeah.
We will read our relationship, conservatives will read our relationship with Canada, for instance, in a difficult way because the Canadians have a lefty government and they want a right-wing government. Our relationship with Israel ought to transcend questions of the partisan identification of its government at any given time. We can have a good, productive, fruitful relationship with them, whether they've got a left-wing government or a right-wing government. But Americans, particularly progressives right now, have such strong feelings about the Israeli right, partly because it's got a religious character, which they're uncomfortable with, partly just because Netanyahu is a much more familiar figure than a lot of other world leaders, have this really difficult time dealing with the Israeli question because it's hard for them to get past Netanyahu. This hasn't always been the case in the United States. George W. Bush was a member of a conservative party. Tony Blair was a member of a Labor Party. They had a very fruitful, productive working relationship. Barack Obama was a member of the left-wing party in the United States. He had a good relationship with Angela Merkel, who was leader of a right-wing party in Germany and an important figure in broader European politics. So it is possible to have this cross-partisan international cooperation. In fact, it should be easier because it shouldn't really matter to us very much. A lot of these domestic issues that Netanyahu is fighting with the Israeli left about. And on the particular question of the war with Hamas, there's a great deal of unity in the Israeli polity. Left and right are much more on the same page than you might expect, and more than they probably would be in the American context. Although immediately after 9/11, we had a pretty strong consensus on doing something.
Yeah, this is such an important thing for all of us to put in that it really shouldn't matter when we're doing this international work. It shouldn't matter if one side's further to the left or further to the right. We got to get to the interests of the country, allies, alliances, regional issues that really should transcend all of that. And sometimes I think it becomes hard for us, as you mentioned, sometimes we get so focused on the political personality, whether that's a Benjamin Netanyahu that you can rightly say, look what he did or what he tried to do in terms of the court and the balance of power. You can go after that all day, again, left, right, or center. And then you have dealing with, Hamas, which is a completely different thing. And then you've got Gaza and the Palestinian people. How do we get to that better space where we can do, as you described in the piece, look at these international things in a little different way than just the personality politics?
Well, we've got to do a better job as citizens of trying to understand what's actually going on. One of the things I noticed, because I write a lot about economic issues, is that American progressives will often speak in very, very glowing terms about Sweden. And what you'll find out if you talk to them for 5 minutes is they have no idea what's happened in Sweden since the 1990s. Sweden is actually very capitalistic, in some ways very libertarian kind of country. Its welfare state is not what it was back in the 70s. It's got a very, very trade-oriented free enterprise economy. And, it's done a lot of things that American conservatives would look at over the years and say, well, maybe that'd actually be a good thing for us to do in terms of trying to decentralize power, trying to disperse some of the responsibilities for the welfare state, trying to get their finances a little more in order. But they don't know anything about Sweden, right? So you can talk about Sweden and think it's this sort of, thing from the era of wearing socks and sandals back in the late 70s and early 80s. And we do that a lot. Americans, there are a lot of Americans on the right who really like Viktor Orban and his administration in Hungary. And I think they would like it a lot less if they knew more about it.
I think that's so important. I love one of your closing lines in your piece at the Dispatch, and everyone need to check that out at thedispatch.com. You say, partisan blinders and language that obscures meaning make it difficult to see the plain facts. I think we should have that chiseled in granite, and all of us place that above our computer screens, because I think that's where we often get lost.
So much of our political conversation, especially on social media, is really designed and intended to obscure meaning and obscure communication. Orwell was writing about this way back in, Politics in English Language in, I guess, the 1940s, was it, when he wrote that? This is an old method of propaganda, of, flooding the zone, as it were, with either meaningless communication or misinformation or stuff that's based on assumptions of bad faith or malintent on the part of your interlocutors. And this is just a way to keep a real conversation from happening. So if we could do what your advice is, which is try to be a little less possessed by rage in the conversation, a little more open to talking and trying to understand what other people are actually about, and also understanding that the U.S. relationship with Israel, like the U.S. relationship with every other country, has aspects to it that go beyond left-right domestic politics in the United States. We have long-term, real economic and geopolitical interests there that we need to secure and act in the interest of.
Fantastic perspective, as always. Kevin Williamson, national correspondent at The Dispatch. Kevin, love your work, and thanks for helping us elevate the conversation today. Great perspective.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Such an important conversation, and so important for us, especially as it relates to international things, foreign affairs, that we have to stop viewing it as citizens simply through the lens of our politics, whether that's left or right. We got to get to the issues and the interests of the country, not which political figure likes this or hates that. So it's a different kind of conversation that we have to get to. Big thanks to Kevin to helping us do that today. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. Big hour number 2 of Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio,
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. Governor Spencer Cox is denying Tabor-Honey's final petition asking for a reprieve from his scheduled execution. His letter to Honey's lawyers says the issues in his case have already been addressed by the courts and the Board of Pardons. The execution set for just after midnight on Thursday morning. The Alpine City Council has passed a resolution putting the Alpine School District split on its ballot this November. At least 7 other city councils are voting today on the same issue. The district has grown to become the largest in the state. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. At today's White House briefing, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said Vice President Harris, has consulted with Biden in her process of choosing a running mate.
President Biden respects Governor Walz's life of service, serving in the Army National Guard for 24 years and becoming the highest-ranking enlisted soldier to serve in Congress.
The White House says Vice President Kamala Harris called President Biden this morning to let him know that she had chosen Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up on the day now, 293 points. NASDAQ up 166. And our KSL weather, another really hot one before things start to cool off. That's next. KSL News Time 2:01.
You know what's great about KSL's traffic coverage? Trained traffic reporters and real listeners.
Trading information and making the commute safer and faster for everyone.
Every 10 minutes on the 9s, we have you covered on KSL News Radio.
Power outages happen year-round, and they're always unexpected. What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and some people have medical equipment that needs to stay on, or maybe you don't want the hundreds of dollars of food in the freezer to spoil. Regardless of the reasons, Any Hour Services can help with a backup generator. Now, a lot of people think that backup generators cost thousands of dollars, but we have packages that'll run the essentials and start at less than $2,500. That includes the generator, the connections from the generator to the house, and the installation. We also carry and install larger generators that can run the whole house and kick on automatically when the power goes out. Of course, those cost more, but if you call right now, you can save $1,000 on any standby generator purchase over 9,000 watts. A licensed electrician from Any Hour Services will walk you through the process and show you what options are available. And if you need it, we have flexible financing options available, even if you've been told no in the past. To schedule a free estimate, call Any Hour Services today. Google Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
This is Jay Broadbent from Alpine Home Medical. I'm excited to let you know we're currently having a summer sale on power scooters. As we celebrate the spirit of freedom and independence, we want to make sure you have the chance to experience it. We have a wide range of power scooters designed to enhance your mobility, and they're all available at a discounted price. These special offers only come around every couple of years, and once they're gone, they're gone. Come visit us at any of our 11 locations to take advantage of these fantastic deals, or you can browse our selection of discounted scooters on our website. We're committed to providing the 5-star experience. We can't wait to assist you in finding the perfect power scooter. Visit us online at alpinehomemedical.com. That's alpinehomemedical.com.
Let's face it, nothing makes you look older than you really are than thinning hair. But what if you could not only increase your hair count, but promote new hair growth without surgery, without drugs with potential side effects, and without a prescription from your doctor? Well, now you can, thanks to a breakthrough new supplement called Hair Grow, provided by New Nordic, the #1 supplier of dietary supplements in Europe. Hair Grow is now available in the U.S. Only Hair Grow contains tocopherol, a powerful antioxidant that has received a U.S. patent. Multiple clinical studies show Hair Grow is safe and effective in promoting new hair growth. In one study, 95% of the patients using Hair Grow saw increased hair count. Don't lose more time and more hair. Try Hair Grow today to feel and look your best. Available online at Amazon, Walmart.com, and NewNordicUSA.com, or in stores at your local CVS. Look younger and feel more confident with Hair Grow by New Nordic at NewNordicUSA.com or in stores at your local CVS.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Good speeds on the Valley freeways, but in Summit County, we do have a crash. This is southbound SR 224 Olympic Parkway, New Park Boulevard. And this is going to be an accident just south of the I-80 junction near New Park Town Center. All vehicles and emergency crews are to the right. Plan to visit the 12th Annual Utah Renaissance Fair, August 23rd and 24th at the Young Living Farms in Mona, Utah. Visit utahrenfair.org for tickets and details. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Hot again today with a high of 103. Tomorrow 100. High of 90s going into the weekend, and there's an increasing chance of thunderstorms later in the week. Right now, we've hit 100 degrees. It's partly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com, where Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, as we continue to track the presidential politics, of course, Vice President Harris is enjoying one of the best momentum surges, I think, in American political history. Very short window. Amazing what she's been able to do in consolidating and capturing the nomination. What she's been able to do in terms of fundraising is record-setting beyond record-setting. And the energy, of course, is rising and continues to rise in a Democrat Party that was pretty deflated and pretty depressed rolling into the fall presidential campaign. And, of course, with President Biden announcing that he would not move forward, that he would step aside. And so now suddenly the honeymoon period is on, and it is being extended. You have to give that to the Vice President Harris, that it is continuing to roll along. The one thing that may stop that momentum, the one thing that could once again change the dynamic of what has been a very volatile race, is the R word. And no, it's not Republicans. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
So let's think again about what we think we know in terms of the momentum the Democrats have right now. And clearly they have it. The Trump campaign has not found its footing from the moment that President Biden announced that he would not run and that he would not be the nominee for the Democrats. They don't have a message. They don't have a strategy. They are just kind of flailing at all kinds of different things, and it's not going particularly well on the Republican side. The Democrats, of course, are riding the wave and the momentum. And I think the big thing that is looming is what we saw take place on Friday with the jobs report, and then what took place yesterday in a massive sell-off and plunge that had many economists talking about the R word, recession. Yesterday, I spoke with a good friend of the show, Eric Bain from Reason, and we talked about the market sell-off, what we saw, and we tried to make some sense of it in terms of what it is, what it isn't, what of it is hype and hyperbole, what of it is actual reality that we need to be aware of, both in terms of the economy, regardless of who you're for in the presidential race, but the things that could impact the race as well. So as we looked at the uptick unemployment rates, obviously that triggered the sell-off and raised a lot of speculation about that R-word, recession.
Over the past 3 months, unemployment rate has risen to an average of a little over 4.1%. There's been this kind of early warning signal given by this jump in unemployment. And so that is, if you believe this historical trend to be an accurate predictor of recessions, that is the thing that is sounding alarm bells. And certainly you're seeing in the stock market today some of the consequences, I think, of that threshold being triggered on Friday.
Eric also talked about how the economy is trickier to understand in a post-pandemic economic world, and that it's an unknown factor in terms of how that's going to play out and impact the 2024 election.
It's really interesting. We're going to be going through, I think, we're still sorting out some kind of wonky monetary issues coming out of COVID. We're still dealing, we don't really fully understand. I don't think anybody fully understands the effect of the now $35 trillion national debt, what effect that will have on unemployment and inflation going forward. So, yeah, we're in a little bit of uncharted territory here, and having it all happen during a presidential election is certainly unprecedented in modern American history, for sure.
And then finally, I asked Eric to explain how the rate of unemployment and the fact that it's increasing doesn't necessarily signify that there is certainty in terms of a recession.
Governments should treat this as a trigger for enacting stimulus and other responses to head off a coming recession. But of course, we don't have those policies in place. So this doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't pull any triggers. It doesn't cause any changes in government policy. But clearly, it does have some effect on the stock market. Clearly, people have been paying attention.
So clearly people are paying attention, and that's going to be one of the interesting dynamics. There are always things in a presidential campaign year that nobody can predict and that nobody can really control that ultimately play a big role in determining who wins in November. I think right now with Kamala Harris clearly having the momentum, we're just standing by for a big rally taking place in Philadelphia today where the newly minted running mate will be unveiled as Tim Walz from Minnesota takes to the stage for the first time as the number 2 on the ticket for the Democrats. So we'll watch that play out. And they've clearly had the momentum. And now the one thing that could stop that momentum is talk of recession. And it was interesting in my conversation with Eric yesterday, just how everyone's trying to spin and push and pull what this means and what it doesn't. And there's this thing called the Psalm rule that kind of points to the fact that, if you look at the triggers and the things that usually lead to a recession, these are them, and we've hit them. And I thought it was very interesting that the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, said now that the Psalm rule, get this for a parsing of words, a statistical regularity, which is another way of saying it's happened every time these things have all come into play. He said it's not an economic rule where it's telling you that something is going to happen or that something must happen because these other events took place. But it is a statistical regularity. In other words, it's happened every time when those things have taken place. But again, it is not a hard, fast rule. It is not a lever of power, but it is a statistical regularity. And I think it's one of the few things that could change the dynamic of the Democrats' momentum right now, and that is the economy, because it's the one area where the American people feel it the most and most acutely, and not just for themselves. because many Americans will say, you know what, I'm doing well, but they know their neighbor's not doing well. Or maybe they have a newly married child and they're struggling to get through school, or maybe they've got grandchildren in places that are tough and difficult. And so people feel that in a lot of different ways, not just in their own pocketbook, but there's this gut instinct in the American people. And I actually think it was one of the biggest challenges that Joe Biden had. Joe Biden, in his running this year up until a few weeks ago, was trying to tout some of the things that he had passed, the legislation that he had passed, where some of the indicators were. And while they were true, they were not in alignment with what the American people were feeling and experiencing, not just in their own home, around their own kitchen table, but their neighbors and their friends and their relatives that are struggling economically. That they might be getting by, but maybe they're having to work 2 or 3 jobs, or maybe they're surviving here, but they're really struggling in other situations. And so I think it's really significant to think through one of the things that Vice President Harris has with the wind at her back. The economics of it is going to be one of those uncertainties, especially as we get past Labor Day and get into the fall to see actually what comes next. All right, we're going to stay with that part of the conversation. As I mentioned, we are keeping our eye on Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where coming up soon-ish, I'm going to say, you'll have Vice President Harris and her newly declared compadre on this one, her tag team partner. As it's hard to say the vice president and the vice president. Vice President Harris and the nominee for vice president on the Democrat side, Tim Walz, will be taking the stage in Philadelphia. We'll cover all that. We'll go to it live when we have a moment here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Is it the beginning of a slowdown?
Nearly everything on Wall Street is tumbling.
Or just a bump in the road?
The jobs report on Friday in the U.S. came in significantly weaker than expected.
Get up-to-the-minute updates on the U.S. economy and how it impacts your bottom line.
We have you covered.
Mornings and afternoons
on KSL News Radio. In 2024, dating is a disaster. We've been ghosted, breadcrumbed, stuck in situationships.
Hi, I'm Debbie. I'm Caitlin. Welcome to our new podcast, Dating at Her Age.
Dating has been so dicey for us, we asked KSL, can we launch an all-new podcast about it?
People use these dating apps. You're not really dating when you're on the dating app.
Dating at Her Age, brought to you by Mountain Home Services. A new episode drops every Thursday on KSLNewsRadio.com.
This Friday from 10 to 1, the movie show comes to Sound Sleep Medical. But first, take the time to learn about a better night's rest. Sound Sleep Medical delivers oral appliance therapy that treats sleep apnea without the use of CPAP machines. They're professionally fit, warranted, and covered by most major medical insurance. End the days of a poor night's sleep. Sound Sleep Medical will help. Call Sound Sleep Medical at 801-716-8672 for details. Sound Sleep Medical.
My wife and I always loved doing everything together. Jiu-jitsu, kayaking, and intimacy was always on point. It was around my early 30s when I noticed a downward trend. Watching a lot of TV, putting on weight, and just full of self-doubt. I had tried another men's clinic with disappointing results. It's the personalized treatment I receive at Revive Men's Health that has been the complete game changer for me. I've got my energy and motivation back, I'm feeling stronger than I did in my 20s, and it made me a much better husband to my wife.
I'm Eric Ramos, healthcare provider at Revive Men's Health. If you're always feeling tired or moody, have a difficult time sleeping, or decreased libido, you may be suffering from low testosterone.
Book your free T-check and exam at Revive Men's Health, Salt Lake City. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Many people worry they're not making the right investment choices inside their 401ks. Did you know that you might have a little-known opportunity to add some additional investment choices to your 401k and get the help and recommendations you've been looking for? This exciting feature is called a self-directed brokerage window. And the best part? The money still stays within your 401k. Learn how the trusted advisors at Capital Wealth may be able to expand your investment portfolio. To learn more, call or text the word VISIT to 801-877-9800 or go to CapitalWealth401k.com. Improving your 401k might mean the difference of retiring a few years earlier. Let's find out. Schedule your no-cost 15-minute consultation with the Capital Wealth team today. Call or text the word VISIT to 801-877-9800 or go to CapitalWealth401k.com. Advisory services offered through Capital Wealth Advisors, LLC, a state of Utah registered investment advisor.
Email from school about the incident today.
Scary.
You know, teachers like me, parents, we don't always know as much as you guys do about what's going on with other kids.
Half the time, it's rumors.
Yeah, but if you're ever concerned about a friend who's having trouble with alcohol, prescription drugs, anything, you need to tell an adult, someone you know and trust. That can be hard, but speaking up about a problem is what helping a friend is all about.
For more information, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Tim and Amanda.
One of the big differences, I think, between reading a story online and hearing it from us, Tim, is that, you and I are allowed to share a reaction. We need to be able to say, what in the world were they thinking? So that people listening will know. We feel it too. When we read a story that sounds ridiculous, we're right with you. It sounds ridiculous.
Well, we get caught up, I'm sure just like our listeners do sometimes, in death scrolling on social media. And fact-checking it on your own is tough. The great thing about tuning in every morning and starting your morning with us on KSL is you can count on the fact that when that information comes out of the radio in your direction, it comes from reliable sources.
It's already been fact-checked.
Right. And that's not always easy when you're getting it online. Finding who wrote it, when was it written, has it been updated with the current facts of the day that change sometimes minute to minute, not just day to day.
Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Governor Spencer Cox has denied Tabor Unhoney's request for a reprieve. His execution still set for Thursday just after midnight. Second, the Alpine City Council has passed a resolution to put the Alpine School District split on the ballot this November. And third, the White House says President Biden respects Governor Tim Walz's life of service. He was chosen by Kamala Harris as her vice presidential running mate today. 100 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. And, in an era of rapidly advancing technology, the spread of misinformation and disinformation poses a growing threat to the integrity of the democratic process. We've had recent incidents involving a doctored video of Kamala Harris. That's a very stark reminder of how easily false narratives can expand and grow in the digital age. And as always, we want to turn to someone who gets it and can help us get underneath all of that, especially as foreign actors keep ramping up their efforts to influence U.S. elections and even just division here at home. Jay Evenson, opinion editor at Deseret News, had a great piece on this in terms of, one, are we just a little too easily suckered with that kind of political propaganda these days because of our bias and division? The technology makes it actually pretty easy. And Jay, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Boyd.
So dive into this for us. You mentioned a video that came out about a week or so ago. Break that down for our listeners who maybe didn't track that one real closely, but why it's indicative of things we've all got to be aware of.
So this was a video floating around on X, formerly Twitter, and it had a tagline of Mr. Reagan USA, which of course could be anybody. And it had I think what was originally a campaign video for the Kamala Harris campaign, but they had taken her voice and digitally altered it. And so she was saying things like President Joe Biden has been exposed as senile and that she was the candidate now, and that even though she really doesn't know the first thing about running the country, and also claiming that she was the ultimate diversity hire because she's a woman and a person of color. This is, of course, in her own voice. And I've heard people say, well, that's easy to spot as a fake. Well, it is if you're people like myself who are in the media and tuned into this all the time. But if you happen to be just a regular American who maybe is scrolling through your feed on social media and this comes up, I'm not so sure people are going to recognize it as that. And the difference here, so lying is not new in American politics, right? You know, that's not a shocker to anybody. But it's one thing if you have a candidate who stands up and says, my opponent is a crook, and presents some evidence of that. That's a completely different thing than having your opponent's voice and face seemingly telling the audience that, yes, I'm a crook, as if they were caught, you know, with a live mic, that they weren't expecting, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's why it's why it's so important that we get beyond the headlines, because even on some of these fakes and some of this propaganda stuff that's out there, if you only listen to the first little bit, it might sound normal. Usually the further you go, you can start saying, okay, that doesn't square quite right, or, oh, you know what, this does look like a fake. But if we just take the headline, or you just take the first little bit of it, it's pretty easy to be deceived, regardless of how engaged you are in the process. One of the things that you pointed out was that this was an interesting comparison to the United States and a place we don't often get compared to, Slovakia. Explain that one.
Yeah, about a year ago, they had a big election in Slovakia. And of course, they have a parliamentary system, so you're voting for political parties. But the leader of one of the parties, it was a pro-NATO party, was just about, I think, 2 days before the election, somebody released an audio version of it. It sounded like his voice explaining to a prominent journalist in Slovakia how he was going to rig the election. Now, this happens, you know, with not enough time really left in the campaign cycle to rebut something like that. And that party ended up losing the election. Now, they were the pro-NATO party, so it's easy to point fingers at Russia and say they were behind it, but that's never been proven. But, you know, you can kind of look at the evidence and really wonder about it. So the intelligence officials in the United States have been warning us here lately that Russia has been hiring Russian PR firms to conduct these disinformation campaigns in the United States. And I don't think they're trying to promote one candidate over the other. I think what they're trying to do is sow distrust in our own democratic institutions in this country and turn us against ourselves.
Yeah.
And we need to be very wary of that, because a lot of this is confirmation bias. If you hear a bad thing about a candidate you don't like, are you going to be skeptical enough to question that and look for sources and see if it's true? Or are you just going to go with it because it reinforces your own biases?
Yeah, the bias is such a big part of all of this. It makes it so much easier for people to manipulate and to sow those seeds of discord. And I agree, Jay. I think it's so important for us to recognize that a lot of these foreign actors, it's not necessarily that they're for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or former President Trump and the Republicans. They're just about division, discord, and distrust of the institutions here in the United States, because they know the more they can cause the American people to lose trust in that, the more they lose trust in each other. And that is a very important strategy for them. And we know that there's a lot of those actors out there, whether it's Russia. We know Iran's been involved in a lot of different things, especially relating to Israel and Hamas and some of the protests on campus. What else should we be watching for as consumers to make sure that we don't become part of that deception?
You know, what I say is that Americans, we have to be more attuned to disinformation. And I think the best thing that we can do is find trusted news sources, places like KSL and the Deseret News, and there are other sources as well. And, of course, those of us who work at those places have to be extra careful that we source everything, that we make sure what we report is accurate and the truth. We also need to be aware Russia's not only interested in turning us against each other, but they have some of their issues as well, like the war in Ukraine. And they've been sowing stories in our media about how the foreign aid that we've been sending to Ukraine has been used by President Zelensky to just buy yachts and to live it up, none of which is true. But even in Congress, we've had people who've believed those lies and who have repeated them. This becomes very difficult when people in power and people in positions of influence repeat some of these things, then I think they really take on a life of their own, and people think that there's some authority to it because they heard a trusted voice repeating it.
Yeah, that's right. And it's that repetition that often becomes the real problem, because you do have someone in a political office or someone who does have a level of trust with a certain constituent base. And then when they start repeating it, then suddenly it's really true because so-and-so told me it was true, or I saw it on Congresswoman's so-and-so site, and that just reinforces that, and again, further undermines that confidence factor. Just in our last minute here, you also pointed to the fact that Elon Musk had retweeted this one video that we talked about earlier of the vice president. And that gets, even though he put on there on his first retweet that it was a parody, it still got 130 million views. And how many of those people saw it as parody, and how many of them just assumed it was fact?
I think we have to assume that a lot of them saw it as fact, and that's really concerning. The big question here is, as I leave you, is what do we do about this? And Utah, the legislature passed a law that makes it a crime, and you get a $1,000 fine for every infraction if you try to post an AI political ad. But that's not going to stop the onslaught coming from Russia in our national elections. And a lot of people are saying Washington needs to have stronger laws against this. I really don't think laws are the answer. I really think it's the American people being a little smarter in how they consume the news and a little bit more skeptical about everything they hear.
Yeah. Great perspective as always, Jay, even since someone we trust and that we turn to, opinion editor of the Deseret News. Jay, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Again, that's Jay Evenson from the Deseret News. You can check out his piece at Deseret.com. And we do have to be a little skeptical, and we do have to be a little more vigilant in terms of how we approach what we consume, especially if we're doing it on social media. The standards are different there. And a lot of that just gets pushed and perpetuated and validated. And before you know it, it gets repeated over and over again. And for places like Russia, for places like Iran, there's nothing they like more than when we're at each other based on their disinformation. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. More Inside Sources coming up next here on KSL News Radio. We're standing by for Philadelphia. Tim Waltz will be introduced as the running mate to Vice President Harris in a big rally in Philadelphia. Stay tuned.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. The body of a 51-year-old man who went missing in Willard Bay over the weekend was recovered this morning. The Utah Department of Natural Resources says the body was found by rangers in the far southeast corner referred to as Freeway Bay. A man was shot and killed in the Glendale neighborhood of Salt Lake City overnight. Police and paramedics tried to save the man's life, but he died from the gunshot wound. And officers say there has yet to be an arrest.
I think the one thing is here, there's no threat to the community right now. We are looking into this, but there's nothing that indicates there's a threat to the community. This appears to be an isolated incident.
Detective Michael Russ says the victim was 41 years old. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. 7 Americans were injured in a rocket attack in Iraq this week. ABC's Ann Flaherty says, or has more rather, from Washington.
A U.S. defense official says 5 American service members and 2 contractors were injured in the rocket attack at Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq on Monday. The official said 2 have been evacuated for care while the other 5 are being treated on base. All 7 injured personnel are in stable condition.
Iran had threatened retaliation after a Hamas leader was killed by an explosion in Tehran. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up on the day now 294 points, the NASDAQ up 166, and at the close of trading, the S&P 500 was up 53 points. Our KSL weather. This is as hot as it's going to get this week, that's for sure. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
We hope you have the right app on your phone for news. You probably have dozens.
But the KSL News Radio app, well, it makes our live stream super easy.
Plus, our talk shows are right there as podcast for your workday.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
When you're getting a new roof installed, you don't want to wonder, when are they going to be done? Or even worse, what are they doing up there? You'll never have to ask when you hire IWC Roofing because their team of certified installers will be texting you pictures from the roof. You're going to know exactly what's going on and what you're getting for your money. And on most homes, they'll do the entire job in one day. In, out, cleaned up, and they'll even power wash your driveway just to say thank you. Now, you think you'd pay a premium for this level of service, but IWC does so many roofs. They get the material for less, and they pass the savings on to you. IWC is an Owens Corning certified platinum contractor. Of course, financing is available. Even better, their summer special, up to $2,000 off your quote. But you have to make the call. $2,000 off right now. Call IWC Roofing, 801-232-5690. That's 801-232-5690. Or go to IWCRoofingUtah.com.
Hey Utah! When it comes to guiding the growth of our state, you buzzed in with your comments, and we listened to what you had to say. Your feedback on the future of Utah's housing, water, transportation, and open space will continue to help our leaders make important policy decisions, preserving and improving our high quality of life in meaningful ways for years to come. So, thanks for speaking up. Learn more about our state's future at guidingourgrowth.utah.gov.
If you're looking to move out of your parents' place, you could really cut expenses by bundling your car and renter's insurance with Progressive, which is good because your little brother has gotten really territorial. You're blood related. You'd think it would be fine to share food in the fridge. I mean, who writes their name on every individually wrapped slice of cheese, Tyler? Still, you've got to admire the commitment. So bundle your renter's and car insurance with Progressive and use the savings to help you move out and have all the cheese you want. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company coverage provided in service by affiliates and third-party insurers. Not available in all states.
This is it. Shop the Lowe's Closeout event to get up to 70% off select major appliances for your home. Plus, get up to 60% off select patio furniture and accessories for your outdoor spaces. So hurry into your local store today because these deals are too good to last. Shop them now before they're gone because Lowe's knows savings. Lowe's knows home improvement. Valid through 8/7 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Discover the best of senior living at Trio Orem and Trio South Ogden. Today's older adults aren't wrapping up their life's journey, they're seeking a new one. And Trio Independent Living is here to help them do just that. With a smart, modern, and connected lifestyle, residents cultivate relationships and maximize independence through signature programs like Prime Fit Wellness that bring living well and well-being to life. Welcome to the new age of senior living. Schedule your visit at leisurecare.com/Utah today.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
Salt Lake City PD wrapping up an accident at 2100 South, 1600 East. And we have a vehicle fire called out eastbound I-80 in Parley's Canyon. We believe it's between Lambs Canyon and Parley's Summit. We're still waiting for fire crews to arrive. Fill up your bucket list in Box Elder County. History, recreation, wildlife, excellent dining and shopping await you. Learn more at visitboxeldercounty.com. Sponsored by the Utah Office of Tourism. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
We're already at 102 degrees today. Tomorrow, not quite as hot, 100 with 90s going into the weekend, and then there's an increasing chance of thunderstorms later in the week. And again, 102 degrees right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We often talk about the complex relationship between Congress and the media and how it often shapes the perception of those in our national legislature. And while Congress often faces criticism because it's their fault, there are a lot of things that impact that in terms of perception, in terms of the activities that go on. What policymaking and legislating is really about often makes it hard to really cover without going straight for the high drama, high conflict areas. And so we want to dig underneath this just a little bit in terms of what's our responsibility, what's the right perception, what's the right balance in terms of how we cover what happens, whether that's in Congress or whether it's in the state capitol somewhere around the country. To help us do that, Robert Oldham, a PhD candidate in politics at Princeton University. He's also going to serve as an American Political Science Association fellow on Capitol Hill starting in 2025. That's going to be a fascinating season to be there for that. I had a great conversation on an AEI podcast with Kevin Kosar talking about media impact on perception of Congress. And Robert, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me on, Boyd.
Great conversation with Kevin about this. We often joke about the approval rating of Congress. It's usually somewhere in between, like the coronavirus and a dictator from Cuba. It seems to be hovering kind of in that 14 to 20 range. But let's talk about it in the context of some of your study in terms of how is that impacted by the way the media interacts with it?
Yeah, so our study is about the beat coverage model of Congress. So this is the idea that when newspapers cover Congress, they're really there every day covering exactly, what debates happened, what kind of, statements members made, what kind of votes were taken. That's everyday coverage. Mm-hmm. And so our thesis is that when you do this, when you're giving people too much coverage of Congress, day-to-day insight into what's happening, you're going to almost necessarily underemphasize the moments of legislative achievement. So, Congress, we're not here to argue that Congress, hasn't been affected by polarization, partisanship. These things are all true. Congress has become more polarized, more partisan over the last few decades, but it still does get a lot of things done, particularly when there's a deadline in front of it or there's a crisis, which is what we examine in our paper, the coronavirus crisis. And we basically make the argument that because the media was covering Congress, even during the coronavirus debates on such a day-to-day basis, you almost necessarily are going to see more about kind of the bickering, the back and forth, all these things that, while they might be entertaining and they might be, things that, me as a political scientist, I'm really interested to learn about different maneuvers. Because you're reading so much about that, you're going to underemphasize the enactments that happen in the end of the process. These come together really quickly, but they just end up being one story among a lot of others about, mostly conflict.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's so interesting that so many of the things that do get done in Congress are either done by unanimous consent or a vast majority, overwhelming majority come together to get things done. And that happens every day. And there's great conversations in the hallways and in offices between members on the left and the right. And all of those things happen, but we seem to be so caught from a media perspective, and a social media compounds this as well, that we continue to reward bad behavior. I loved in your conversation, you were talking about kind of a conversation with some college students and which members of Congress they could actually name, and the results of that were pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, the people that they know are, usually the conflict hawks, the people that are out there and, putting their name either, it's increasingly social media, but it's been cable news for the last several decades too. And that's just, I think that's when we think about what members of Congress are incentivized to do, a lot of that is to go, become famous by being in Congress, to go put yourself in the media, because that not only affects your, chances of maybe running for a higher office one day, but it also just affects your ability to, market your brand, maybe get your own talk show or do something like that afterwards. And that conflict, kind of persona or narrative that really sells a lot more than the, put your head down workhorse policymaker that, is really still a very important part of how Congress operates.
Yeah, and it's the hard work and heavy lifting that's usually done very far away from cameras and microphones that really move the nation forward. It's one of the other things that you pointed out, Robert, that I really loved is talking about, whether it's a broadcast news or whether it's a newspaper or an online site, to look at what the choices are in terms of what you cover and how you cover it. Just give us some perspective in terms of ways we could do that a little different or even consume it a little different as we take it.
Yeah, so I think the difference that we point out in the paper is that because, this, beat model that's something like newspaper coverage, and, it's newspapers, but it's also any news source where you're just kind of getting constant updates of what's happening in Congress or in politics. Those kind of news sources they're going to be giving you so much information that we think probably you're going to miss the forest for the trees. If you're tuning in instead to something like TV news or, something where there's just, they're unable because they're covering a lot of what's going on in the country. And by TV, I, don't really mean cable, but more of the the broadcast networks, they are going to give you a different idea of what's going on in Congress because they are going to, focus more on the big moments. This doesn't mean that they're not still attracted to conflict and they still, don't want to tell that, that story as well. But you're not going to see as much of what's happening every day in Congress, which is usually conflict. Instead, they're going to show you this is the big thing that happened. This is, the American Rescue Plan or the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act or the Affordable Care Act. And so that part of the conversation, what I was trying to get across is, from a reader's perspective, particularly from the perspective of people who are quite interested in politics and, want to see themselves as politically engaged, I think that we have to think more about how are we going to, kind of separate the wheat from the chaff? How are we going to, be able to interpret a story and say this is, something that's important, or is this just something that a journalist, needed to make a deadline on? And this was, the thing that was put in front of them, which was this press release from, one part or the other knocking each other.
Yeah.
Being able to kind of tell that story apart from the stories that are more, focused on achievements that Congress might ultimately end up making.
Yeah, because so often we almost create this self-fulfilling prophecy that, and you pointed this out, that sometimes I think it appears that Congress is more dysfunctional than it actually is. Not to say there isn't some great dysfunction in there. And a lot of the things you just described in terms of, what a reporter may go up with, either because they're under a pressure of a deadline or they get a press release that's usually connected to a fundraising email that will go out later in the day. How do we actually get past that? And because one of the things I worry about, Robert, would love your take on this. I worry about the fact that we're losing that trust in the institutions as citizens. And the more we believe it's complete dysfunction, the faster we spiral out of control that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question for me. We're trying to identify a trend, but it's a hard thing to solve. I mean, I think politics is it's become just a really salient, entertaining, engaging part of our lives now. And I think probably some of trying to involve ourselves in other types of civic organizations and institutions, and it's trying to maybe intensify that connection to politics, particularly that media connection, a little bit more than that. That's probably going to drive us away from focusing all of our attention on what's going on and what kind of conflicts are going on in politics, and maybe that would help us focus a little bit more on the important things that are coming out of Congress, not the daily things that are almost necessarily going to be conflict.
Great perspective. Robert Oldham, PhD candidate in politics at Princeton University. He's also going to serve as an American Political Science Association Fellow on Capitol Hill in 2025. Robert, we look forward to having you back on the program. Great perspective, and this is a part of the crucial conversation we got to stick with. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, again, that's Robert Oldham joining us. And again, we often complain about the dysfunction of Congress, and there's a whole lot of it. And sometimes I think we believe it's even more dysfunctional than it actually is. There are a lot of good people. There are a lot of great conversations. There's a lot of good policy that actually gets done in our nation's capital. But sometimes, both because of the way it's treated in terms of clickbait and headlines, and the way it gets perpetuated on social media, it prevents us from valuing the good work that is getting done. And remember, we have to reward the good work that's getting done if we want more of it. If all we do is validate the bad behavior and the conflict, we'll get more of that as well. All right, we'll step aside for one last break. We'll come back with some final thoughts on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. And again, we are standing by. Vice President Harris and Governor Tim Walz are set to speak at their first rally in Philadelphia coming up soon. We'll cover that for you on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
That precious cool air inside your house shouldn't be seeping out through old drafty windows, but if it does, get stylish new windows and frames at factory direct pricing from Advanced Window Products. This is Jeff Kaplan. Advanced Window Products has been building windows here in Salt Lake City for 38 years, but even if you don't need windows, they can give your interior a fresh new look with blinds, shades, and shutters from Graber. They offer custom crafted window treatments featuring the trendiest designs, premium materials, materials and quality without compromise. Advanced Windows offers start-to-finish service with shorter lead times so you get your custom blinds, shades, and shutters sooner. Call them for a free in-home consultation with their designers. It's a no-pressure experience, and if you need new windows, $2,500 off on 10 windows or more, or if you need window treatments, it's Advanced Window Products. 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, or go to advancedwindowsusa.com.
Spend less time at the post office. With Formax and Mint mailing systems from Les Olson IT, you can quickly, accurately, and easily process your outgoing mail and even save on postage. Fold your documents, stuff and seal your envelopes, print addresses, weigh and measure to apply proper postage, all with the click of a button. With multiple model options available, you're sure to find a Formax solution and Mint mailing device that perfectly fits your business needs.
Les Olson IT.
Hey, this is Dan, the laptop man from PCLaptops.com. I've been advertising with KSL Radio for decades now, and radio works. With all the clutter on social media, radio cuts through all the noise and gets directly into your customer's brain. If you're a small business and want to reach the local audience here in Salt Lake City, KSL Radio is the way to go.
If you'd like to know more about the benefits of advertising with KSL News Radio, email Stephanie Palmer at spalmer@ksl.com.
I have had both friends and family members that through the years have suffered from arthritis and the joint pain that comes because of it in knees and hips and in your back or anywhere else. And they've wanted to avoid surgery at all costs because of the downtime and the uncertainty of whether it would actually even bring them relief. Isn't it great to live in a time when we have these new ways to treat that pain emerging, like the cellular therapies that you've heard me talk about from QC Kinetics? They have helped people just like you every day with advanced regenerative medicine that actually accelerates your own body's healing properties, revitalizes your joints, and gets you moving again. Why give up the things you love with the people that you love? You're going to find the QC Kinetics medical professionals right now in Mill Creek, Provo, and Bountiful, and they're offering free consultations. 385-766-1987. Call them today. 385-766-1987. That's 385-766-1987.
This Friday from 10 to 1, the movie show comes to Sound Sleep Medical. But first, take the time to learn about a better night's rest. Sound Sleep Medical delivers oral appliance therapy that treats sleep apnea without the use of CPAP machines. They're professionally fit, warranted, and covered by most major medical insurance. In the days of a poor night's sleep, Sound Sleep Medical will help. Call Sound Sleep Medical at 801-716-8672 for details. Sound Sleep Medical.
Troy, was no one going to tell me it's already August?
Summer's really flying by, huh?
It's time to lock in for some serious summer fun before it's too late.
And Bish's is prepped to make your summer finale the best part of the year during the end of summer sizzling sales event happening now.
An unforgettable end to your summer starts with epic RV deals to extend your camping season.
That's why right now Bish's RV is offering 0 payments until 2025 on approved credit.
What? All play and no pay for the rest of the year?
You know it. Plus, find low payments on every type of RV with no hidden prep fees.
Like travel trailers starting under $149 per month OAC.
And fifth wheels starting under $299 per month OAC.
Plus, get a free 1-year Bish Fix membership with every RV purchase.
Make your summer finale the best part of the year during the end of summer sizzling sales event. Only at Bish's RV in Salt Lake and American Fork, where memories begin.
OAC 90 days no payments, finance plus 60 days with supplemental payment. Not all buyers will qualify. Based on 20% down, 8.99% APR for 180 to 240 months. Stock numbers 84310-83690-79362-7800. Subject to prior sale. See dealer for details.
Hey, it's Brian from Olson's Greenhouse. Nothing makes a landscape bloom to life better than flowers from Olson's Greenhouse. And summer is a perfect time to create flower-filled garden beds, adorn your front porch with gorgeous hanging baskets, and decorate your backyard patio with grand container gardens. Whether you love bold and bright colors or soothing and calming hues, flowers grown by Olson's Greenhouse include something for everyone. We're continually shipping varieties to your local garden center that thrive in the summer heat. Flowers like pentas, daylilies, and ice plant love to bask in the summer sun, and they'll sip water while doing it because they're water-wise and drought-tolerant. For more information on gardening with ornamental plants, or just to find the closest garden center that carries flowers from the Olson family, head on over to ogg.com or find inspiration on our Instagram at Olson's Greenhouse Gardens. That's Olson's with an O-N-S and ogg.com.
Any Hour Services can make sure your AC keeps you cool this summer. Whether you need a tune-up, repair, or just a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a man was shot and killed in the Glendale neighborhood overnight. Police say no arrests have been made. Second, Utah House Democratic leader Angela Romero has expressed her support of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as Kamala Harris's vice presidential pick. And third, 7 Americans were injured in a rocket attack in Iraq this week. 102 degrees right now and partly cloudy. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as it always is. I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, of course, we are standing by. We do expect the rally in Philadelphia to begin very shortly with Vice President Kamala Harris and the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, who will be introduced as her running mate in just a few moments here. We'll go to that live here on KSL News Radio because we got you covered, of course. Will be the first time that he will address a big audience like this and the nation, as all eyes turn to him as the number 2 on the ticket with Vice President Harris, and of course all the implications that will go along with that. I think again, this was a very safe choice for Vice President Harris, someone who's not going to be making waves and making noise, someone I think she has good chemistry with. They're a good ebb and flow. It's not like you're having 2 prosecutors up there. You've got the high school football coach in the high school gym rallying the kids, and that's what he's going to do. And he is part of that blue wall strategy of those Midwestern states of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. And regardless of how you feel about his policies, and there will be much to debate about that, I don't think this is going to be a policy election over the next 91 days. It's going to be much more a vibe and a feel and the idea that we've been talking about. And he fits in with that idea model, that he is common sense, he's practical, tactical, and that will play well in those blue wall states that are so essential to the Democrats. Now, Republicans will try to get a message to counter that. And interestingly, we've pointed this out, that the former president and his campaign have not gotten their footing from the moment that President Joe Biden said, I'm out and I'm not going to run. And it will be interesting to see what messaging they do come up with as they try to move that all along. Well, I want to round out the program today. We've been doing a few principles from the Olympics as we've been going through the 16 days that are the Olympics. And there were a couple of subtle ones over the last few days that I think are worth noting and pointing out. If you watch the individual apparatus in gymnastics, the women's gymnastics yesterday, of course, it was a fierce competition, and the floor routine, of course, was the fiercest of all. You had some really amazing competitors in there. You had, of course, Simone Biles from the U.S., you had Jordan Childs, and then you had Rebecca Andrade from Brazil. And it was a high-flying, high-wire act kind of competition, and ultimately, the Brazilian won the gold medal. And so that was news in and of itself. That Simone Biles didn't win another gold medal. It was also some news breaking there, as there was a discrepancy in the scoring that was challenged by the U.S. Officials and coaches, and ultimately that gave Jordan Childs the bronze medal. But the moment that caught me in the midst of all of that was during the medal ceremony. And the 2 U.S. gymnasts had taken their place in the silver slot and the bronze slot. They had received their medals. And then it was time for Rebecca Andrade from Brazil to take her place on the stand. And as she did, and as she was given her gold medal, Jordan Childs and Simone Biles looked over at each other and said, "Should we bow?" And it was a classic moment of sportsmanship. These fierce competitors, the 2 U.S. on the right and the left of the gold medalists from Brazil, bowed down saying, "You are the champion today. You are the winner. You own this floor exercise here at the Paris Olympic Games." And I just thought that was a classy moment. I thought it was a classic moment. If you haven't seen the visual of it, it is an iconic moment where you had all of these fierce competitors and two of them from the U.S. Bowing to the winner in a way that I thought was both fun but also very instructive in terms of what really matters in the end. And clearly they have great relationships there, and that's an important thing for us to keep in mind, that it's not always those on the top with the gold medal around their neck. So many of the important stories of these Olympics are far away from that. They're of all the people who compete in the Olympic Games, very few get any medal, let alone a gold medal. There are thousands who participate and go home without anything other than maybe a personal best. Maybe it was just the fulfillment of a lifelong goal. The other moment that I wanted to point out was Katie Ledecky, who is the GOAT when it comes to swimming, especially distance swimming in the United States. She racked it up. She's now the most decorated woman swimmer and athlete for the U.S., with the exception of one other swimmer who you might know. But Katie Ledecky, as she came out of the pool after her longest race, 1,500, she was walking across. There was a young girl in the stands, and Katie Ledecky just stops and just waved at this little girl. And this little girl just went crazy. She was yelling and she was screaming and how cool it was. And then she said probably the most important thing of all. She said, Katie Ledecky saw me and waved to me. She saw me. We all need to be seen. And for someone who had just had a swim of over 15 minutes to win a gold medal, to see a young girl in the stands, that's what it's about. And there are times for all of us every day where we can just see people. I think it's a gift. I think it's the highest achievement we have when we see other people and then we stop and give them our presence by noticing them, by engaging in a conversation, by sending a text or a message, seeing other people, and being deeply seen, by the way, are the things that really do make us human and make us different. And so hats off to Katie Ledecky. In a moment, she had to be exhausted. She had to be overwhelmed with a gold medal. But she saw a little girl, and that little girl knew she had been seen. That's a powerful message. That wraps it up for us on Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Good afternoon, 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Jeff Kaplan. 100 degrees even in Salt Lake City. KSL's top story. Another step's been taken towards splitting up the Alpine School District. Alpine City Council has voted to put the question on the ballot. KSL News Radio's Amy Kobabe with details.
City councils in Alpine, American Fork, Cedar